A common hot topic in the RWBY fandom is what some call the White Fang or Fauna storyline, and so I wanted to address the matter here and now. However, first some house cleaning is necessary to ensure that we're all on the same page. First and foremost, I think it is necessary to distinguish between the White Fang storyline, the Fauna storyline, and Blake's storyline, because her story is woven into both, but not exclusively tied to them. Meanwhile, the White Fang story is tied to the main plotline, and the Fauna storyline could be better described as overarching world building woven into the characters and story. With that in mind, I will only be discussing the White Fang here, from their plot to their themes and inspirations. Though allusions to other storylines will naturally be made, I'll try to keep them limited. 5 years before the beginning of Volume 1, the White Fang was a diplomatic organization blended with a protest movement, formed in the wake of the Faunus Rights Revolution. However, after years of frustration and slow progress, one Sienna was chosen to succeed Gira Belladonna, promising a new approach to gaining equality. Namely, an aggressively defensive ideology in contrast to their formerly pacifistic roots. Now, much of Rooster Teeth's first audience is American, or at least absorbs a lot of American media by osmosis, so when it comes to civil rights movements, one of the most common touchstones familiar would be the African American civil rights movements, to which the White Fang storyline is often equated by fans. However, oppression and bigotry, as well as both peaceful and violent resistance and everything in between, hardly has roots only in America, which is why I feel equating these aforementioned story points with only one movement is perhaps inelegant. Now, the potential avenues for reference and examples of historical mistreatment and prejudice are depressingly expansive, and analysing them in this context would feel somewhat uncomfortable, far too theoretical, and likely involves stepping over many other voices that are more relevant. That is why here I am focusing on the White Fang's policies and strategies first and foremost, as well as their political ramifications. With that in mind, I turn your attention to the Irish Republican Army, or IRA, and their operational history. The easiest way to summarise this would be to say the Faunus are the Irish, while the human nations barring vacuo embody the British Empire and the USA. I cannot take responsibility for thinking of this comparison, as many other insightful fans have discussed this before, and their insights make the comparison too clean and too clear for me to overlook. Both peoples suffered varying shades of exploitation, violence, and discrimination at the hands of their oppressor, both on a micro and macro scale. This prejudice continued despite world-shaking events such as taking part in war together and the changing tides of social technology and culture. Similar treatment was experienced by the Faunus, and as we see even in the modern day, promises of legal equality are not actually met. This makes it clear that in all but name, the Faunus are second-class citizens, at best, dealing with widespread disenfranchisement and exploitation and limited legal protections from prejudice. Into the real-world historical arena stepped the Irish Republican Army, who experienced a great deal of popularity at different points during their long history. Much of the support was rooted in their standards. If one looks to the IRA's operational history, you will find many examples of bombs or raids either warned about by the IRA itself or done against empty targets. These actions were taken to disrupt and refute British colonial rule, undermine their ability to operate, and cost them money while removing civilian casualties from the equation, or at least working to keep them minimal. If we look to Sienna Khan's White Fang, we see a similar pattern emerging. If a protest was attacked, it would have armed defenders. If a store refused to serve fauna, seemingly in violation of the Faunus Rights Revolution Treaty, that store would find itself destroyed. Moving up the chain of reprisal, organisations that dealt in Faunus oppression would find themselves sabotaged, raided, and their indentured workers freed. This shows a managed scale of proportional retribution directed at specific targets for known acts. But things change, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly, and both the IRA and the White Fang show examples of that. For example, within the IRA there are often divisions and debates, there are eventual handovers of leadership, and certain records indicate them receiving foreign aid at different points, which gave them access to weapons and other goods. What's more, the IRA's popularity would be in flux and begin to fade over time as their actions became less focused, more destructive, and cost civilians their lives. We can see similar actions taking place over a shortened time frame within the White Fang itself, if we compare how it was under Sienna's leadership to Adam's corrupted branch and his eventual coup. Adam Taurus was introduced more interested in murder than he was in securing useful resources for the White Fang, hence why he wanted to blow up the train in the Black trailer. His own character trailer highlights that while in Sienna's presence he would restrain his bloodlust, but when out of sight he would cause far more damage and concoct excuses after the fact. Similarly, while initially pressured into this act, he ultimately embraced the aid offered by Cinder. This is despite her plans leading to heavy casualties among the Veil chapter and serving no actual purpose for the White Fang or Faunus, but were merely destruction. This would also be why we saw the Veil chapter taking on new recruits, as they could not expect Sienna Khan's aid with such a foolish scheme. We also see that Adam's shift in policies were not well liked among the Faunus of Kyokuana, and that despite his own claims, he had to seize power in a secreted coup with only about 20-odd collaborators at most, and his call to future actions being reliant on propping up a beloved figure as a martyr. Ultimately, we see Adam's plans forward by Blake Belladonna and the Faunus of Kyokuana, who were alerted to the danger he posed by his attempted coup. His reckless actions were born of being drunk on his growing power, traits that were burgeoning when we met him in the Black trailer and inflamed by his Cinder-sponsored successors. With that in mind, I feel that the comparison of the White Fang to the IRA is quite well realised. Both movements were initially militant but restrained pragmatists, popular for carefully choosing their targets and limiting civilian casualty. But over time, thanks to internal corruptions and shift in leadership, their methods began to change, leading to a destructive path that robbed them of legitimacy in the eyes of those they were once fighting for. If one wants to see some of my references and more insightful pieces on this subject, there are links in the description. Thank you for your time!